Hi guys, we're buying and selling stocks. Is stock investment behavior normal or abnormal? If you watch this video till the end, you will realize that it is an extremely abnormal act. And yet, we individual investors from all over the world are opening a huge number of stock investment accounts. This is a prime example of routinormalism. It's abnormal, but it's a phenomenon that feels normal when it becomes a routine. This is the definition of routinormalism. I think we are very abnormal. The individual investors to buy stocks? I said it was an extremely abnormal act for individual investor to trade stocks. I'll explain the reason right away. Now, guys, there are two main categories of stock investments. 1. Inflation hedging. 2. Arbitrage trading. But both of these are disadvantageous to us. 1. Let's start with inflation hedging. This includes ultra-long-term investments and long-term ETF investments. Can we make more profit than BlackRock or Vanguard? No, it's impossible. If Vanguard made a profit of 5% a year, and we made a profit of 5%, then it's not even an equal rate of return, because Vanguard can invest almost all of their imported capital, while we can only invest what is left after deducting living expenses, children's education expenses, hospital-related expenses, parent support expenses, and other miscellaneous expenses, from our imported capital. That is, if we assume that we invest 20% of our imported capital and calculate the return per imported capital, we only get a return of 1% per imported capital. And in comparison, Vanguard's return is 5% on imported capital. Have you heard the news that Vanguard received hospital treatment? Have you heard the news that Vanguard gave birth to a child and sent the child to daycare? Have you ever heard of the news that Vanguard is supporting elderly parents? You probably haven't heard of it. This means that Vanguard can play the inflation hedging game under completely different conditions than us, in a much superior environment than we are. The bottom line is that most of us are not in a position to be customers of groups like Vanguard. So we are bound to be losers in the inflation hedging game. Now let's find out who the winner of the arbitrage game is. Arbitrage is almost synonymous with short-term trading. In ultra-short-term trading, we place orders slower than hedge funds like Renaissance Technologies. And our orders are pushed to relatively disadvantageous positions. They have a comparative advantage over us by using much faster lines and computers than we do. In quant tradings, they have data and analyze tremendous tick data from the past several decades. Therefore, they have a comparative advantage over us here as well. In automated trading, they are armed with extremely expensive algorithms. It is not much different from us fighting the T-1000 of the Terminator, while armed with a pistol. Also, the total cumulative order costs or commissions for those many transactions are enough to squeeze our returns. In addition, there is information-based investment in categories of stock investments. There are surprisingly many individual investors who invest after hearing some interesting information from someone or somewhere. Now, let's learn about information. We need to know how much information is asymmetry and how unfavorable we are in the battle. If you win a war, you can obtain spoils of war, claim war reparations, and take land from your opponents in the war. Spoils of war, war reparations, and land taken from enemies can be likened to the profits and returns in so-called stock investment war. Why is stock investment likened to war? Because it is a competitive structure regarding who gets limited resources. What are limited resources? Unlike in the past, calculation of the increase in recent global GDP is composed of global monetary base currency expansions and sustainable leverages under the current system. The expanded monetary base currency is amplified in various ways and goes through a leverage process. And the leverage that is not maintained is extinguished in the clearinghouse, liquidation house, and extinguished by Chapter 7 or Chapter 11. The total return or profit sum in stock investment cannot exceed the increase above. The returns in the stock investments can never be photosynthesized by sunlight. And it is not created by starlight from Andromeda. It is only a limited resource. It can be likened to a war, because they compete to occupy limited resources. However, modern warfare has a strong information warfare character. Information has played a big role in warfare in the past and present. But in modern warfare, with the development of communication and science, information has become even more important. There are 18 intelligence agencies in the U.S., and all of their information is integrated into the DNI. The budget of the DNI in 2024 is over $5 billion. The UK also has a famous intelligence agency called MI6, and as of 2019, MI6 spent over $1 billion on personnel expenses alone. They spend such a huge amount of money to obtain various and important information. But how much can you spend to obtain information? Can you afford to run an intelligence agency and pay personnel expenses for informants? It is impossible. This is why we are doomed to fail in the war, called information-based stock investment. In addition, the process of monetary base currency expansions and leverages flow down from the upper steps to the lower steps like water in a fountain. Therefore, a great deal of information about the process of base currency expansion, changes in the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, the process of leverage in commercial banks and investment banks, and the contents of the government's budget investment comes to us in later stages like down water in a fountain. We cannot help but be exposed to late and low-quality information. Well, by now, you must have figured out that our stock investment behavior is an abnormal behavior that is bound to fail. Despite this, why are so many individuals around the world constantly opening new stock investment accounts yesterday, today, and tomorrow? And why are they constantly taking on reckless challenges to recover the money they lost? This is where routinormalism comes into play. How abnormal behavior becomes routine and feels like normal behavior. I will introduce the mechanism in the next episode. Please look forward to the next episode of Routinormalism.